She's the owner of Bridge Consulting, or Bridge Economic Development Consulting Group that does some very nice economic development work around the region. I don't think they just operate in Oregon. I think they probably do things outside of Oregon too. And she's not unfamiliar with Lakeview, and we're not unfamiliar with her because she was here a little over a year ago and did a report for the Brownfields project that SCOED has been doing. She did a really nice little economic survey report for us that really helped, sort of looked at all the different sectors of economic development in our county. It wasn't just Lakeview. And did a very nice report. You all have that one too in the email that I sent to you. So we armed you with lots of good information, but I'm not going to talk too much more. I want Alyssa to talk about the scope of work that she and her colleagues put together for us to address the scope of work that we requested from a couple of consultants to talk about, or to try and start our project on the downtown planning and development that we've been talking about now for, what, year and a half, 2 years. And this is sort of like the next step to hire the consultant. It may sound like we kind of went around in a backdoor way of doing this because we selected the consultant first, because now we need to go out and raise some money to hire them. And the reason why we did that is that we want all of the entities, organizations, whether it's the town or the state or a foundation, to know who it is that we're going to be working with, because that will help them understand our commitment. And Alyssa is not unknown to many of those folks. So just to let you know, I have put in a small grant application to Pacific Power, and it is pending. I should know something in the next week for $2,000. And I'm right in the process of finishing up a grant to the Lake County Community Foundation for $4,000, and we should know within the next 2 weeks if we're going to get that. And that will basically cover our a 10% or 20% even match to anybody that we go to asking for funds. And we're primarily looking at, and have been engaged with Ford Family Foundation now for about 2 years, about investing in our community. And this is the project we want. We've been gearing up for them to partner with us on. So that kind of brings you up to date with how that is all going on. So without any further ado, long introduction for Alyssa. Would you like to talk to us about your proposal?
I will, but do we want to do introductions first?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you. So, Mike, why don't we start with you?
Mike Beeson, Hunker Mall, in Kesman with the LCP.
Stacy Farman with LCP.
Ann Logan with LCP.
Kevin Winter, LCP and Examiner.
Jessica Bogardus, the Lake County Chamber of Commerce.
Tilly Flynn, the Lake County Examiner.
Tom Batty, Tom Biking King.
Danielle Jester, Lake County Examiner.
Judy Brown, Lake LCP. And Jackie Ship with the Pacific Crest Federal Credit Union.
Okay, great. And then we have Sandy. Sandy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sandy? Yes. Would you like to introduce yourself? Nice to meet you.
And she's on the LCP board also.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stand up. So it is wonderful to be here. Thank you, Ginger, for the introduction. What I can do is walk through, I'm not going to go through our proposal verbatim, you guys have it, but what I really wanted to talk to you about is the philosophy of Bridge Economic Development, our experience, and some of the initial thoughts, recommendations, and I'd love to just spend this time, since we're here, to hear from you all, what your visions are, what you want out of this process, why you love Lakeview. So I'll give you a little bit about me, but I really would love to hear from you all. This is hard talking. It's good experience. It's good, but
I think if you're 6 feet,
well, I will respect. So my background, I'll just give you a little bit. I started out, so my background's in planning, but I spent the first 8 years of my career managing commercial development. So I worked with the Costco's, the Targets of the world along the West Coast. So I'm very intimately familiar with development, what it takes to develop a project. So that's the foundation of where I come from. And why I say that is it's very important, I think, for a community when you're doing a downtown plan that it's grounded in market realities. So you can draw a picture and have a lot of visions of what you want to do, but there's a lot of realities of the cost that goes into the development. What are those hurdles? What's the reality? And you want to meld both of those, right? You still want to have a vision, but you want to see something happen. So that's the first point of my career. And then I pivoted to economic development. So about 2008, I worked at the City of Vancouver, Washington, managing economic development there. And nothing like the Great Recession to really force you to get creative to help businesses, and that's what we did. So I spent a lot of my time coming up with very low cost but impactful programs to help small businesses to move into downtown Vancouver. So I know both the physical structure of what it takes to develop a project or redevelop a building. And then I also understand the business's perspective. So what you're going through to get your I haven't actually owned a bike shop, but I know what you're going through in terms of your perspective, in terms of revenues, cash flow, and so forth, right? So I come to the project understanding both sides of those equations. And so with that, and then the last thing I wanted to mention is, as Ginger said, we have worked, we basically say we work west of the Rockies. So we've worked in cities like Bozeman, Montana. We just worked on their downtown plan, also worked on an urban renewal plan for them that's been successful, but we've also worked in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, ranging from Staten, but even now I'm working in Portland. So we understand the breadth of very small communities ranging to very large communities. But my passion is working with communities like Lakeview. And I'm especially interested in this project because you have someone like Ginger and Ken at the helm, and I'm sure many of you are committed as well. And what I've learned over the past 10 years or so in economic development is we can give you a plan, but if you do not have a committed community that's gonna take it and run with it, nothing will happen. So I've seen that with Lakeview. I had the privilege of being out here, as Ginger mentioned, about 18 months ago. And I see that within your community. I've been in some communities where I'm gonna hand them the plan and I say, oh boy, this isn't gonna go anywhere. But I see a lot of opportunity with Lakeview, and I think you guys should really respect that and own that. And that is a very critical and unique asset. And so you have that working to your advantage. So I applaud you for that. So that's just a little bit of background. I'm gonna pause there and so I don't have to keep talking, and see if you guys have any questions or thoughts, and then we can move into your visions for the downtown plan.
What you had just said, that's what you see with Lakeview. Can you elaborate a little more in depth on what you see as far as the core growth in Lakeview?
So I think we came out here 18 months ago, and we were working on the economic opportunity analysis. And so we worked with Jessica, we got to know Jessica well, and Ginger on that. And I think what I found really compelling, and we were talking about that, Ken, is unfortunately, another town we worked in was Ruidoso, New Mexico. Kind of almost similar to Lakeview, very isolated, similar climate, great access to the outdoors. But that's all they were, was a tourist community. That is all they did, was get people from West Texas, El Paso, oil money to literally come and enjoy the weather. And we worked really hard for them to understand this is not healthy for your community, to just purely be a tourist economy, because as we can see with COVID, it's not healthy to only rely on retail sales and tourism and relying on other people visiting your community for an economy. What's really compelling is Lakeview is your genuine ties to the cattle and agricultural community. You have a real economy here, right? And why that's important is because then the retail services that are here are more year-round supported. When you're a tourism economy, you hear this all the time, it's die in the shoulder season, right? Big Sky outside of Montana struggles immensely because people are only there for a few months of the year, right? So I think that is a very critical foundation for you. And so that's when we did this economic development strategy for Lake County, is we were really encouraging the county to look at and supporting kind of that supply chain. How do you keep that, your cattle and your agricultural economy going? Also, you have really compelling small manufacturers like GK Sound Booth, right? GK Sound Booth, they're doing great stuff, and he has really supported his staff, and they're inventing some new concepts, right, tied to the sound systems, helping them. What can the county be doing? So we gave a few suggestions on there. What can you do to expand your manufacturing base, right? So you have that opportunity within Lakeview to balance that out, to not be purely retail, but to have that broader economic base, which we call traded sector, which can then bring in the dollars, have the salary to keep the retail businesses going and thriving. So I think that's what one of the key opportunities is. Plus, you're also somewhat of a regional hub. We were talking about, you have the hospital, the car dealerships, the only bike shop in the county, right? So you're kind of that regional hub as well, the county seat. So that's a strength as well. How do you leverage that? So those are some of the opportunities we see from Lakeview. Yeah.
Do you see any opportunities with the use of renewable resources that have been happening across the county and around Lakeview?
We see that opportunity, and so kind of stepping back to Economic Development 101, when we want to be talking about those renewable, economic development is really about the research and development, creating new products, right? And so we see there's great use. What we understood is the farmers are installing solar panels, right? And they're using it, but it's not so much you're innovating new renewable energy here. I think it's great that the culture embraces it. And I think that's something we highlighted in our report is, especially when we talk to the ranchers in the community agriculture, they have to be sustainable. They have to be thinking into the future, right? So I think that's really a compelling element of your culture and speaks well for Lakeview, is you are forward thinking. Some communities I go to, their strategy is nostalgia, and they just want to go back to the 70s. That's not going to get you anywhere, right? So I think that's the bonus of the solar energy component, is it just speaks to that forward thinking, I don't know if it's progressive, but just forward thinking, open-minded approach to new solutions.
Yeah, I saw in your scope of work that you've done some work in the Dalles.
Yeah.
That's where I grew up, so I'm pretty familiar
Okay.
with the challenges they faced in the early 80s. Could you talk a little bit about what you did there?
Yeah, so the Dalles, have you guys, oh yeah. we came here on the same concept of why we went to the Dalles. We did what's called an economic opportunities analysis that's funded by the State Department of Land Conservation and Development. So we did an economic analysis for the Dalles. And what we did there and what we found what was happening in the Dalles speaks to this notion of personalities, right? And this happens with a lot of cities. And Dalles is just kind of catching up. The city itself wasn't really looking at economic development, right? It was just looking at housing permits and doing land use development and thinking more about your traditional zoning. So similar what we did with Lakeview when we called out those opportunities for your economy, we talked to the Dalles about the opportunity with the, we'll just call it the drones, right? You got in situ out there, right? And you've got a lot of opportunity with the drones. Also, you have some of the ag industry out there really still tied to the Dalles, right? But what we were seeing is a lot of investment going into the downtown, a lot of Portland interest moving out to the Dalles. But what we wanted to highlight for them, and they do not want to be Hood River, which we thought was fabulous, right? And so what they weren't doing was looking strategically at how to invest in their downtown. So we didn't do necessarily a downtown plan for them. We looked more broadly at their economic assets, but what we did call out for them is say, your downtown is a critical asset to your future. And the city wasn't really looking at it. They weren't really paying attention to their downtown. And so from an economic development standpoint, we said you can attract remote workers, right? If you've got broadband, which is an issue we'll talk about here. So you're going to get a lot of people not wanting to be in Portland anymore and moving to a city like Dallas. So, and they want to be in your downtown core. So how do you think differently about where your community is going? The other interesting dynamic we had there, we tried to encourage them. A lot of the younger people on the committee wanted to embrace the fact that Dallas is called the Dirty. And we said, own it, right? You got a beer named the Dirty, but they wanted to be the end of the Oregon Trail. And we're like, really? Is that where you're, that's kind of, that's that 70s notion. So they're struggling with that and they're going to work on that. But what we really elevated to them is, one, think about your economy regionally. It's not just about your city. And then two, it seems obvious, but really be intentional about the development of your downtown. And don't just think about it as retail, but office space, people coming in and working there and living and working there. So that's what we did for the Dallas. Yep. Another great community.
Have they enacted a lot of your proposals in the Dalles? Are they still working on it?
We just finished that up last year, but yeah, they took on, similar to here, we had a brownfield grant, so they're looking at that. They're going to be evaluating sites that are available for redevelopment and starting cleaning those up with the brownfield sites. So that was one of our recommendations. The other issue we were really working with them on is, do they need to expand? The other issue they weren't really leveraging is, it's a very interesting, I was very confused at first. The city of the Dalles, Oregon owns the airport in Washington, or is half owner, and they had a business park around there, but they weren't doing anything with it. So we said, it was all stubbed out, streets, utilities, ready to go, 2-acre sites. So we got them to start promoting that. And so they were seeing some attraction to some of that development. They're really struggling with that. So you guys don't necessarily have that, but they're really struggling with that Oregon-Washington border there and thinking regionally. Those are some of the actions.
So they are doing some of the stuff you recommended.
Yes. Yeah. And what we always do is we want to do some easy, approachable first steps, yet still have some reach of achieving goals. And so when we make recommendations, we're going to give it to you prioritized by years. And we're always saying, okay, who's going to own this? Because if you do, that's my project management background, I found out really quickly, if you do not say specifically someone's responsible, no one's responsible. And a lot of times you'll see these plans and it'll say, there's 5 different organizations tied to this action. And I don't know if they're trying to be polite and not exclude anyone, or they just don't want to make that, that decision. But 9 out of 10 times that action will just sit there, unless there's someone pointed out, say you're responsible for that, for accountability. That's what we found in our experience. Deadlines and responsibility. But that, I wouldn't myself be doing that. We need you all to come up with those recommendations. If there's no buy-in from the community, then it's just going to sit off to the side, right? That's the other element to this process. So it's a very iterative buy-in process.
Earlier you mentioned the ranching and farming is a core economy, and lifestyle, and we want to maintain that. At the same time, we need more, not many, but more folks to come. But they need a reason to choose, like there's some key points. I also mentioned about downtown, but we had to get some folks to come to inhabit some of the storefronts and stuff. But we maintain the values of the ranching and farming. How do we mesh that core economy with other business or people coming in? How do we mesh that?
So the first, and so we talked about this in our economic development strategy, and you guys have been working on this, and we see this across the board, and it's so hard. I know it's not an easy issue, but broadband is vital, right? Because what that will allow you to do is, we've seen it with COVID. Unfortunately for the people who are working in retail and restaurants, right? They're the ones who have lost their jobs. And they're really struggling. But those who have access to more of that remote working capability are still fully employed. Many people I know are busier than ever. So just think about that as a concept for Lake County. If you do not have that infrastructure, you can't get that workforce here, right? And that is, I think, even more so what I'm hearing. So in Portland, we're doing a strategy there. And we heard from athletic and outdoor companies. So we'll think of the concept here, right? People who want to be outside, access to nature. One company said 90% of people don't want to come back into their office. So if you're in the athletic and outdoor company and you're passionate about biking and hiking and camping, and if you had access to great broadband, would you want to consider a city in more rural community, right? That's the bend factor, if you will. So thinking about that. So having broadband just as an alternative option. The other thing that's critical is we talk to the ranching community for live access to live auctions, right? So they need that for your economic base and also for your retail, I'm sure. That's what we found Ritos in Mexico. A lot of the retailers couldn't even scan credit cards sometimes. So you need that just for your economic base. To balance that, what we would really encourage and what we want to think about this strategy is, so the bike shop serves the local community, that's what you're asking about. You're serving the local community, but you've got the add in on the tourists. So you could go to, what are the restaurants that serve the families, right? How do you make it more of a community-based? You're thinking of the community first. So when we would be thinking about a retail strategy, who you'd want to be encouraging, we would really want you to think about always the community first, and then the add-on icing of the cake is the tourists, because they will come too, right? And in fact, if you're a more genuine community as opposed to sisters, that's going to be far more enticing for the tourist base, a more of an authentic, genuine community.
Thank you.
So that's how we would really approach that, is always Lakeview first. That is your top priorities. And then plus the retailers can survive better because they're serving more of a year-round population. So that's why this is so critical, right? It's for the Lakeview residents. You're not doing this for people to come. This isn't going to bring people to Lakeview necessarily. They'll enhance their experience, but you're doing it for the community first.
It keeps people here.
Yeah. And so that's what I would really encourage the community to think about. We were walking around, and my son's here. I noticed there wasn't like a community gathering place, like a park, right? Where do the families go, right? Where does the community go? That's what we saw in Bozeman. They didn't have the same thing, right? Vibrant Main Street, great bars, great restaurants, but there was no place for the community. And so no one from the community was going downtown. It was all big. It wasn't chains, but it was becoming pretty much tourist row, which they did not like and is not a healthy element for the community. The other thing that we would encourage you to think about, and we'll be talking about with this downtown plan, is every downtown has a personality and nodes and little districts, right? So, and retail wants to gather in one certain area. So being very intentional about that. I don't know what that is right now. We'll need to work with you as a community, but some areas you have more professional services, which is great. But think about, we would encourage you not to think about intermixing retail there. And you can't really social engineer this, but to your other point of attracting people, if you're going to attract investors, having a vision and a direction and saying our community is on board is hugely, hugely significant, right? Or if you can get storefront programs to say, we'll help you with some of this investment. Those are the small steps that are really important. Did that answer your question? There's something else.
So one thing I think that might be interesting is how do you think, you kind of outlined some of this in your report, but could you talk a little bit about how you see us getting started on all of this once we are able to actually get going?
Get started on that, and that will have to be a matter of us. So the first step was walking, and we already knew Lakeview, but I think what's important for you all and what we highlighted in this proposal is we're in a whole new world with COVID coronavirus, right? And what that means for retail and restaurants. And so one of the things that we really wanted to highlight is that understanding of there is a finite amount of retail that a community can support. And that's going to even be more critical to understand now that everything has, a lot of shoppers' habits have moved to e-commerce, right? Online retailing. So one, you need the retailers to pivot that direction. How do you support them? But also respecting, it's going to be even harder than ever, right, within the retail going forward. So we would just want you to caution in terms of expectations and what can really happen. I think what's also important in terms of the actions we talked about is identifying who are the cooperative building owners, property owners who are here, and who are the proactive business owners. I'm sure many of them are here. But my philosophy is do not waste your time if you're not going to have a collaborative partnership. It won't go anywhere. So you can sit there and talk about that building all day long and what you want. And you guys know that. And so that would be, but that would be some of the steps we want to take is where is that natural collaboration going to happen in terms of those actions so you don't waste your time banging your head against a wall, right? And so we'll need to look at that, see where the businesses are going in, and see where some of the, we'll just need to look at that in terms of those opportunities and see what's needed. So I would say for, one of the quick actions is the storefront improvement program, right? Getting that going. I don't know where, is that available or?
Well, somewhat. Oregon Historic Preservation Office has a Diamonds in the Rough grant. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but they pay like up to $20,000, or there's a grant for up to $20,000. They'll match that, so $20,000 or $40,000 project is the high end, and then you can request $20,000 to help offset that. It's a reimbursement grant, so you have to start the work, in order, and then you get reimbursed as the work is going. You get billed, and they like to approve whoever it is that's doing your work, so that they make sure that you are actually preserving the building and renovating it in a responsible way. So it has some bells and whistles that come with it that are really in the best interest of the building and in preserving the historic integrity of the building as well as the structure itself. Because some of these older buildings, when we were walking around today and we were talking about the old brick, it's not very good. It's really important for somebody that really knows about brick to be able to deal with that. I know that we've got some outside brick issues on the building that we just got that historic theater grant for, and it has to be somebody that they agree will do a good job if they have some track record. But anyway,
So I think
there's that program, and there's a possibility that there may be some other things from USDA, but it's pretty, it's difficult. What I've found, two things, and that's really difficult for our community or our downtown or our town government to look at, is an urban renewal district and or a business district downtown, and that's not a very popular thing to think about.
Right.
So that's how many of our rural communities have addressed the storefront or the facade development or renovation programs, is through something like that, and we don't have that. So I don't know where we might go with that.
Ginger, I've never heard of a downtown business development group. That would be a great idea here. Why is that not going forward?
A business taxing, it's a taxing
I know.
district.
They've done that in other communities and it seems to work.
Yes, it does. Yeah, it has worked. I think Tillamook has it. I mean, there's several.
Klamath Falls has it downtown.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what those would use. So that could be one of the actions out of this plan, right? So if you
But
guys.
who would manage that though? That would be,
Usually the town manages it, they collect the tax, they
I
manage the
think that's a great
funds.
idea. I love that idea. And that would get some things done and give us a cash flow.
Well, the nice thing about this plan is you wanna know what you're gonna do with that money. Right?
Right.
So who's gonna buy into it if you say, just trust us, give us the money?
Well,
But-
that is one of the
Yeah.
reasons why I think it's important for us to
Yeah.
do this.
Yeah.
Because whether, no matter what kind of a taxing district or what, how it's gonna go, you have to have some sort of a vision for people to grab onto in order to agree and understand. And it's hard for, building owners and businesses to think, oh, another tax. But if they see that it can, help them improve their own properties and their neighbors and
Increase
strengthen the
assessed
economic,
value, yeah.
yeah, that, I think that.
We'd have to have some liaisons, of course, to the city hall or wherever, but I think that's something that really need to be looked into. I think that's a great idea.
Is Scott Langham here?
I don't see them.
But this would be a great tool and a mechanism. You would want to vet that with other building owners, right? And I think it's 50%. I'd have to check the statute again. I think you have to get 50. You have to draw the circle.
Yes,
50% to buy off.
right. Something like that.
So we could look into
Then
that.
we haven't really delved into it because of exactly what we're talking about. We need to have a carrot and a plan.
And what we would advocate for, it's a balance. We always advocate is you use that money for public infrastructure, parks, amenity, and for the storefronts and business. What you do not want, because you're supposed to be increasing revenues, right? The intent is you're increasing the value to your building, but you're also increasing property tax revenue. If it's with the mistake some cities use, you want it. Not necessarily a business improvement district, but a tax increment finance district is they'll use it to build a public facility, which generates no tax revenue. So you've just
Right.
negated the whole point of tax increment financing.
We wouldn't want that to happen.
But it happens in a lot of towns. So that's one of those things.
Well, how often, Ginger, do communities get like a community block grant from the government? They got one here several years ago and they used it to build a head start. Does that come around like every 5 years, 10 years, or?
No, there are always availability of the CBDGB grants, whatever they are. But we have an issue in our county and in our community in that our average income is above the, what is it, Ken? It's not the poverty level, but we have a higher income because of all of the public entities that we have here. We have the hospital, we've got the U.S. Forest Service, the
So that's a
BLM, the
problem.
prison, and it raises our average income and creates an issue. The Head Start building was not, it was a program of that grant source that did not necessarily use that measurement. And so it doesn't necessarily work because we were looking at that type of a grant in the north end of the county for a community facility, and we couldn't qualify because of the income factor.
Another hurdle.
Right.
Well, in the CDB, for you guys, it's gonna go to the county. So if it's a city over 50,000 people, they get CDBG funding, but for you, it's gonna go to, so whatever the county decides.
Right.
You could work collaboratively, but a
Can we drop
lot,
that down to like 2,500?
and it's a very loose use of those funds, so however the county, so we're working with Clackamas County out in Oregon right now. And we're trying to get them to convert it to help small businesses as opposed to prior use of it.
In plans like this, and as you mentioned, you've worked in the Dalles, which is also a smaller community. Do you look at how the housing stock affects the ability to attract new businesses? Because if you attract new businesses, those people need a place to live. I mean, do you ever look in the Dalles or elsewhere you've worked at how the rate of houses for sale and new housing starts, which are pretty much non-existent here right now, affects bringing in businesses and economic development?
Yeah, we talked about it in the Dalles as well. The issue in the Dalles is, so home builders are in building industry to make money.
Mm-hmm.
The property costs and construction costs were about the same between Hood River and the Dalles. They could get a far better premium in Hood River. So all the housing was going in Hood River. My point in telling this is we can talk, we talked about this with the economic development strategy. Housing is a factor, but it is market driven. So here you have the factor of what is going to entice a contractor to come here to build, right? And so Ginger was working on some of those strategies, and that's what we were trying to pivot to. And John Day, I just read the headline and I need to dig into it, but they've been doing that, adding, I think it was a $10,000 incentive to get homes built in John Day, right? So those are some of the things you need. You need to be thinking about the market perspective. What is going to make them build here? You have that platted subdivision. Why aren't they completing the homes? So that's what we would really, from an action strategy standpoint, of think in terms of the mentality, what's in it for them to attract the market to come here and build.
So where does that money come from, that $10,000?
That would be a good question. I can't remember where their source is. I don't know if it was general funds from the city or was it, or it might have been the housing. I don't know. I'll have to look into that, where that source of money came from. But that would be a really good, I mean, if it's working there, right? Similar size community and more isolated. So that's something we would want to look at for best practice. But I guarantee you, John Day didn't just have an incentive and just sit there.
Mm-hmm.
They were proactively going out and saying, hey, we've got this incentive, building those relationships, talking about a vision of our community. Why would you want to invest here? How do you know you're going to make a profit? How do you know this is a good investment? Right? So those are the thought processes that have to go into it. And so part of this, we'll want to be talking to the city as well. I know they were going through city manager transition when we were here.
Yeah, and it's still kind of happening. We haven't talked about that on this visit, but I talked with two of the city councilor or town councilors and the town manager. They're all very supportive of all this. Town manager's out of town, unfortunately. That's why she's not here. And the other two, I don't know what happened. One was going to be on Zoom and the other was going to come in person. But they've had a lot on their plate.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think they're definitely on board in terms of the concept of what we're trying to accomplish, and they understand their key because I've helped them understand that they need to be involved with this group, and they want to be. So just unfortunately, they weren't here today.
Well, and part of that, having been a city employee, my approach would be as we come up with this plan and actions is what's going to naturally align with everything else that they're doing. So this is not viewed as, oh God, one more thing you guys are putting on me when you're already strapped, especially as a rural community. So that's really important, like looking at what Jessica's already doing at the chamber. We want to elevate that and leverage that. We don't want to create something brand new that just adds to it, right? Because you guys are strapped for resources. So we want to just really leverage some opportunities that might not be being utilized as well as they could be. You want them to be friendly. You don't want them to be mad at you.
Right. Yeah. So once we get the ball rolling, what do you think the time commitment, or how long do you think it would take to go through a process, or is it just something that you work on organically? I mean, obviously you kind of have to have an end place, but
I want to look at maybe 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
Make sure there's time for you all to respond. Look at enough time to look at here's our recommendations. Did we hit it? Did we miss it? What's missing? And so forth. So we'll need to line out. So, we want some meetings. I understand town representatives couldn't be here, but like I said, I want to hear. We've talked about what you're doing, but really understand what's already going. So we're not duplicating that, but what's already going. Also, what are the barriers? Like what? We haven't really talked about barriers, but
They care.
and even worse now. So that was one thing we talked about for the economic development strategy. And I don't know, I thought Betty was that was one item I know she's swamped too. But yeah, it's,
Yeah, it's right up there, housing, childcare,
yeah, we added one more to the, right, now we got, yeah.
yeah, now we have COVID.
Yeah.
Right,
But if that works as an opportunity, right, so that's the gathering place for families, is that, I don't know, in the space, is there a place downtown, does that work with your culture, your community, do people wanna do that, but is that something that helps bring people downtown and create vibrancy, right, and it's that making it more of a family place, so that would be one thought we'd wanna explore.
Daycare, I'm referring to many people trying to start their own business, but they have to take care of kids. So it's just one of those barriers that is bureaucratically and costly somehow. And also, in our community, we have nanas and grandmothers,
Yeah.
and grandpas that take care of kids. But for new people coming in and trying to get a business started, they need someplace for kids. So, effective with getting people here for service, hospital, schools. They just need, they have families and they need somebody to take care of. It's just one of those other barriers that we need to address along with all the others.
And what we're looking at in Portland, I work really closely with this organization called Micro Enterprise Services of Oregon, MISO. And they are fabulous because what their catchphrase is, they bank the unbankable. So the underrepresented, under-resourced people that try to go to a bank and they can't get a standard loan. And so the opportunity for them, they align it with, it's a federal funding source called the CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution. So they can, what some of the programs they'll have is like, they call it an IDA grant. If a business owner saves $3,000, they'll match it 2-to-1 with a grant, not a loan, right? Plus they also give them skills on cash flow, right? In terms of hiring people, marketing and so forth. And so why I'm saying all this is there's an opportunity, and it's typically females who go into childcare. But how do you think about that as a business opportunity to create wealth? This isn't just something as a hobby. This is a really important business for the youth, for your community, but also how do you create wealth for these people? So thinking about how could MISO out of Portland scale, I mean, they give loans, I know that they gave a loan to someone in Pendleton, but that's something we need to be thinking about as well, is how do you help these small businesses get the skills that they need and struggle? This isn't big money, right? This could be $5,000 to $10,000. And that would be something else to think about to get those businesses going. Yeah.
Relating off of what you were just commenting on, then how about places that could offer like a co-working space for people wanting to start their own business, but not wanting to rent out a large office space yet because they might not be ready, but developing like a co-working space like, WeWork or something where someone could have a desk and just pay a little bit of rent while they get their business started before they graduate on. Does something like that work in smaller communities like that for people looking to start businesses?
Yeah, we got the broadband, but we always encourage a private person to do it. Like in Klamath Falls, it was an OIT graduate who started it. Unfortunately, that's not one of the strengths of government running those or nonprofits. So we always advocate, if you can, to get a private business owner to do that. I mean, you can if you need to, but it will work here. But we would, like I said, I would really encourage private business to run that if possible.
And I'll just say that, yeah, that does work and has worked here. It's like that's basically how I was able to get the bike shop going. Was Mike had a spare room in Honker Mall. He rented to me for very reasonable.
I'd rather have him making the money, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like let's yeah.
But yeah, you get that proof
We
of
were getting
concept
rich on
without going broke.
So yes,
We're
I
happy
think
to have you.
it would be great here, right? Yeah, and especially if you are having those broadband connectivity issues, right? So where are the businesses going to come in? Maybe like we heard that from the cattle ranching community. If they have to pay bills, they have to come into town, right, to access their bank online, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if you can sit in a coffee shop. So it's actually an interesting concept with COVID and coronavirus now. You can't always just go to that coffee shop anymore. So yeah.
Yes, you can.
Yeah. I guess I got to remember where I am. Different phases
I know.
and different phases in different communities.
Tom's been a great addition to our town, he really has. We're happy to have him.
Yeah, it seems like an amazing business. But you're that one who left the Portland region, right? You didn't want to. Did you tell me why you wanted to leave? You were looking for new locations, but were you tired of Oregon City?
Yeah, well, I had grown up on the eastern side of the state, so was used to a little drier climate. Just tired of the crowds, the incredible cost of living in the Portland metro
Yeah.
area.
Well, that's a strategy we did for the Dallas as well, right? Is you can call it those homecomer populations. So how do you reach out to the Lakeview High School grads, right? How do you reach out to those people who, when also, we have plenty of social media opportunities, but if you can say, Lakeview's committed, we're investing, come check out downtown, here's what we're doing. We've got broadband, that's a pretty compelling if they want to come home. And what I find when the research on that is they want to get involved with the community, and the community decides you can immediately get immersed if you want to. So I think that would be a strategy as well once the plan's in place and say this is our vision, is to think about how do you bring people back to help you with that vision.
So tell us how.
We got to come up with a vision first. But I think the vision is really critical for you all to get on the same page. And it is important. I mean, I've heard that from developers in the region and elsewhere. I mean, just thinking about it personally, how you see this, is if you're going to take a risky investment in a community that has, we were talking about the population was kind of flat, but it's coming back up. Why would you invest here? So being able to convey that message is important.
So you mentioned, this is going back a little bit earlier in your speech, but when you present a plan, like having specific stakeholders to implement that vision. When you develop a plan like that, how far in the future are you looking? Are you looking at like a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan?
5 to 10. We usually do 5. For this, I would probably do 5 and 10.
Okay.
I think Bill Gates says you always overestimate what you can accomplish in 5, but always underestimate what you can accomplish in 10. So I think that would be appropriate, 5 to 10.
So besides coming up with how we're going to pay for this, what would be our next first step? Where do we go once we find the money?
I would work with Ginger to have a few stakeholder meetings to do more information, fact-finding, gathering from the town, the chamber, your board, what everyone's doing. We've started doing that. Mapping out who are the engaged properties. So it's both this plan is both. The other thing we didn't mention was events, right? And promotion and getting people downtown. So there's 2 factors. It's the physical investment for the downtown, but it's also the programs and the events and the messaging and the marketing. So we need to think about both of those coming together and complementing each other. So I need to step back. I've done the walking tour, get to know which building owners are on board, even the historic properties. So look at that physical aspect and then have stakeholder meetings. And then I'm going to create for you, here would be my initial recommendations, but then I want to meet with you all and see, is that aligning with your visions and directions for this community? Because I feel like with your Main Street with the effort you went through with Main Street, I feel like you're pretty solid on your vision and culture. Do you guys, I guess I should ask that though, do you feel like and which is an important first step, is and we want to re-articulate that of where is downtown going and articulate those values. Is it about Lakeview first, right? Is it about the cattle and that? So I want to do that. I should back up and say, That would be a third prong. Stakeholder meetings, look at the physical space and then confirm guiding principles and directions with you all. That would be the first 3 steps for me.
And I think that's a good opportunity to revisit what we did in October.
Yeah.
Because a lot has happened in
Yeah.
a fairly short
Yeah.
period of time, and we don't know how long the virus is going to be with us. We certainly have a lot, we have good intention, and we have had a really good momentum, and we kind of slowed down there for a while when things first started happening, you know, in March. From March till about now, it's been pretty slow in terms of our work as a group, for obvious reasons. But I think the commitments here, you know, to go forward, and there's a lot of work I think that we can do that doesn't require us to be, you know, face to face all the time.
Yeah.
And a lot of the foundation work that needs to get fleshed out that will continue to keep us moving forward.
You know, and one other stakeholder we didn't quite talk about, but I'd want to think about, and I think you have great relations with the regional solutions team, right?
Yeah.
So also, how do we, I learned that working in Vancouver, if you don't have a specific, I want this, it costs this much, go to the state to get it, you're never going to get it, right? So that's another thing that comes out of this, because they're all busy, they don't know who to pay attention to, but if you say, like right now, with a lot of the COVID funding that came out, right? Are people ready to say, I need this program now, how much, right? So that would be another, but that's going to take you time to build those relationships, to get in front of those people, but to have a clear ask is a great way to start those conversations.
We have a lot of buildings downtown that have apartments in them. How does that figure? Would that be helpful for revitalization?
Absolutely. And I know it's a challenge with building codes with old buildings, but that was one thing we'd want you to look at, again, back to this, now that retail has changed so much, is really thinking about how do you introduce other uses rather than just strictly retail. So getting as much housing integrated is really important, and what are those opportunities? The other reason why it's not just vibrant for downtown, but we were talking about those professionals that come in. Sometimes they just want to rent an apartment before they buy, right? So do you have, my understanding is there's not enough of that stock, right? So how do they have different options beyond just a house that they have to buy? So that's the other reason why it's important for attracting workforce.
Under this kind of plan, what role does cultural assets, say like a theater or other cultural events or buildings, play in this kind of plan to develop the downtown area?
From my perspective, it's more about this is a community gathering place, right? This is a place for people to come, interact in space. It's to keep people here. That's not really my expertise, like what to do with the museums, so forth.
Mm-hmm.
We would, I would look to you all to help me with that in terms of what's the value, who's going there. We toured the new one more at the intersection main intersection when you come, which is great. I loved that it was just more passive on your own time, and it's a beautiful space. So I think we want to think about how does it interface. Like if you're going to the museum, is there a place to get an ice cream cone after you do it, right? So it's not all isolated, siloed events. How is this more interrelating and playing off each other and leveraging each other?
Yes, there is, by the way.
What? An ice cream cone, the Burger Queen, but yeah.
So,
Yeah. So that's how I would look at it, is how do you leverage that as a people
Mhm.
attractor? You guys have different perspectives on that?
I like the idea of people who have an investment in downtown getting together, and what Ginger had pointed out earlier about the downtown business thing, that would be a start to get some money going. And Ginger could head that up because you got time, right, Ginger?
No, she doesn't. Sorry.
Well, I think you can get a group of people together and start that. I mean, I really like what happened I grew up in Central Oregon, and And I remember when Sisters was nothing, you could buy the whole town for 50,000, now you could buy square foot for 500,000. And so their development and Klamath Falls is doing the same thing, a lot of communities. I just think there's an opportunity to do that. And we need some leadership, of course. That's why
Well, and
that's why I
I think,
pointed to Ginger.
well, I
Not
think
you.
that what we're doing right now is the first step in going towards what you're talking about.
That
Because
would be okay.
we,
This is
you know,
a unique moment, you saying this. Very rarely do we walk into a community and people
Right.
say, please do this. Right? So
Right.
that's great. This is
I
great.
know,
This is
I
a great
know, it's awesome. We
Yeah.
want to give you ammunition, and that's what this is about, is putting together a plan and identifying some things that are really important to us, so that, I mean, it's basically the piece that will shop what you're talking about. So if we can,
Yeah, that's a great start.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people here that would probably jump on that.
Well, and that's great. I mean, that is, I'm always an advocate of having like a concrete direction, right? So if that's the direction we're going, how do we shape this plan to speak to that audience? Could be one way of thinking about it, right? And those actions will help us.
well, and, you know, there's the physical part. We haven't talked a lot about the physical part of our downtown area. I mean, we talked about streetscape and all of that, but we can't really, I mean, my thought is that we can't really even charge into that until we know more about what we find out through this process. And
Yeah. Where do you want to
that will-
invest? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that will really, it'll fall more into place. I think one of the things that was really striking about our visioning process is that almost every area that we looked at, or everything that concepts that we came up with, is that our buildings were first and foremost in everybody's minds. I mean, it was really, really interesting, is that they were what people loved about our community, they were what they wanted to preserve and protect, it was what they wanted to promote. I mean, it was just very interesting and heartening to know that people really do value that about our community, because sometimes it doesn't necessarily look like it. But people are thinking about that,
Yeah.
and they value it, so that can really go a long way towards the taking a look at the codes and what could happen with the planning part for the town, and to sort of revamp some of that, to make it a little more user friendly, so that we can make some of those changes that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I would, again, advocate more for the physical, because you've also got your lodging tax revenue coming in too, which really, so that's more your events and your marketing. So you want to be thinking about these funding streams. You don't want to be using if we call it BID, right, this business improvement district funds, for things that potentially there's available other pockets of money to be using. The other thing, if you create this BID, what's so nice is what you can do is getting the town on board, is you can go get a bond. So you can do a big infrastructure project. You don't have to just pay with just your small pot of money. The town could go get a bond to do a substantial improvement, knowing that money is committed, right? And so that's the other really important reason why you can make significant changes as a business. And what you want to do is, if you're going to do this street, you want to do it with property owners that are on board, and they're improving their buildings as well. Because sadly, I've gone to communities, it's awful. They took out these bonds, did this huge Main Street development, so now they're indebted. Beautiful street with banners, and all the buildings are boarded up. So you really, I really emphasize, make sure you're getting a public-private partnership out of that investment.
Unfortunately, I think that's part of our problem on East Street. We have some building owners that take pride and want things to happen. And then we have just as many other building owners who let their buildings go and don't realize the importance of keeping their building up to code.
I'm a big fan of competition and sometimes shaming others.
I'm
So
right
and so I feel like that, and if anything, what you're doing is improving the value of those buildings, and maybe another investor comes in. You know, I know sometimes you have troubling property owners that are like, I don't want to talk to anyone. But even if you have half the building owners on board, that's huge for your community, right? And it kind of rises all ships. questions, thoughts?
Every building on East Street is old.
Yeah.
And it seems like.
They have character.
What's that?
They have character.
They're beautiful buildings, you know, but finding, like Ann pointed out, finding people who want to invest back in their buildings and this wasn't our generation started. They let the buildings go 50, 75 years ago. Didn't do anything to them, so now we're kind of stuck with what's left. I think people try to, out of their cash flow, do what they can. But if there was a way to get something like you pointed out, that would be great. And I agree with you, competition is the best thing we can do in downtown. That brings people downtown. So, I'd just like to see some improvement.
Yeah. Other comments, questions?
I don't think I've got any more. I just, you know, I'm interested, I mean, we're pretty much represented here with all the groups that we have that have been involved, except for the town, and that's been hard for all kinds of reasons in the last year or so. But, I mean, I think I would like to know a little bit more from people that are here if what we're talking about feels like it is moving towards what we've been talking about. And we haven't been together for a long time, for 4 or 5 months, so it's kind of hard. But I just want to, I mean, I'm really glad Alyssa is here to explain a little bit more about process and what she's done in the past and how it kind of reflects on where we're at and where we can go forward. But if you've got any other thoughts about our process, it would be great to talk about it now if you want to. You know, our next steps are obviously some fundraising so that we can do this. But I think it's good to have Alyssa here, and I really appreciate you coming to have this conversation because it makes it a lot more real and helpful. So, I mean, if you don't have more questions, that's okay too. But.
Is there anything you didn't hear that you're concerned about or that you want addressed?
One of the things I'm hoping is that this kind of allays some fears about another report that goes on the shelf. Because we've talked about that a lot, not wanting to, you know, this time have that happen. And this feels to me like a more, well, I don't know, I wasn't involved in the other processes, but this sort of opens a door for a lot more action and interplay between the town and different groups that we have downtown in the chamber, LCP, the Merchants Committee, Occupy East Street, and the actual merchants that are in business people. So I'm hoping that is helpful.
What kind of funding are we looking at, Ginger?
So for this project, I think we're looking at around 25,000. So I'm hoping, cross our fingers, knock on wood, that we've got about 20% of it possibly in the hopper right now. The biggest chunk hopefully will come from the Ford Family Foundation and possibly some from Oregon Community Foundation, but
that's great.
They're all in the process of dealing with COVID for their own financial well-being right now. So some of them are kind of hunkered down. Oregon Community Foundation and Ford Family Foundation are kind of hunkered right now, trying to figure out how they're going to proceed and go forward with their funding priorities over the next year or so. I mean, now they're having to deal with what they put forward to us here 3 or 4 months ago, and they said, okay, we have, you know, some money here that we want to help you with, so tell us, you know, what you need to do. And we were all standing here going, we knew we needed it, but we weren't exactly sure how we were going to need it or what we were going to spend it on. So now they're having to look at that for themselves, and it's not going to be easy. Plus, they are gonna be affected by the economic, downturn that's starting to happen too. So we just hope that we can keep them interested and, involved in our process. Ford Family Foundation and Oregon Community Foundation have across the board, no travel, no contact right now, so they can't come out and visit and see what we're doing, but we can do a lot via Zoom. We're gonna start having report outs to them. There'll be a report out after this meeting to them, and we may even do it collectively via Zoom in the building next door once our wall is completed. And it's going to be an interaction to help them understand what we're moving forward to, so that they are forward with, so that they will continue to want to invest in it. And this is the kind of stuff they like, because they can see that it can have a really dramatic change on a community, a really dramatic effect.
Well, and if you could make this comment that you have one business owner
Yeah.
excited about the idea of being, that is music to their ears, that
It
you're
is,
willing to
it is.
invest in yourself.
I think there's more too.
Yeah,
That's huge.
I would hope so.
And listen, we talked about many different facets. Are there a couple of facets that are so co-located or co-joined that they would be priority catalysts to work at that would help with the other things? I mean, I'm looking for, we have many different needs, housing, everything. But is there some that just higher up that would really serve as catalysts for others? Facets to come together?
I can't say that right now, but that is the goal. Is, like, right now, I would say, without really digging into it, you've already invested so much into this together, right, in these buildings. How do you keep that? So from a physical standpoint, how do you keep this investment going here? And I think I want to plant that seed in that challenge. You can't fix all of downtown. You can't spread it like peanut butter. So you're going to have to make some choices to make change, right? And it starts in very small nodes, and then it will grow. So I think that seed's important to see. And that's the perk of me coming in here, is I don't live here, and I can say that, and you guys can talk about my back and say that's a terrible idea. So, but you're gonna have to do that, right? You don't have money to do everything, and you need to leverage investments in proactive property owners. So I don't know that answer quite yet. I think the other factor is, who are the stakeholders who are on board? Every community is so different with their needs. I think it just really varies. But that's what I would first say, is this already has momentum.
We have to keep this, because if we don't, it goes water.
Yeah.
On the whole thing.
It's like they tried it before, you can't do anything downtown.
Just looking for the next real catalyst that would just send a vibration to help other things.
Yeah, so I'll have to, but that is the intent, right, is to say focus here first. You have to make choices.
Yeah, some of them are hard, but
I mean, and another factor is maybe find out, where is their funding support? Is it for housing? Right? Is it for, that's the other tool you want to leverage. Or the childcare. That's what we'll have to see.
I'm just thinking, if you've seen something in other communities you work at, there has to be some similarity, little piece here that really serves.
You don't want me boilerplate, you want me to cookie cutter.
any more questions? Okay. Then I guess we can mosey on our way for the rest of the day. I really appreciate you coming out. I will, we're gonna obviously have some more conversation, and we'll let you know about the two funding sources and what happens with that. And we'll schedule a a Zoom meeting with Katie Jameson and perhaps maybe one of the other folks at Ford Family to debrief what we're doing here and how we see ourselves moving forward. I think you've been really helpful in kind of solidifying what that's gonna look like so that we can speak to it with a little bit of confidence about where we want to go next with it or how it's going to work and working with Bridge. So,
Great.
Okay.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah,
We're looking
thanks for
forward to
coming.
it.
Thanks
Thank you for coming.
for making your vacation, making this part of your vacation.